We're about to crack open a playbook so sophisticated and so absolutely ruthless, it makes modern spy thrillers look like bedtime stories. And the craziest part? This isn't fiction. This is the real-life blueprint for a surveillance state, designed more than 2,000 years ago. You know, we all know the idea of Big Brother, right? A government that sees everything, knows everything. But what if I told you that whole concept wasn't dreamed up in the 20th century? What if it was actually perfected in ancient India, way back around 300 BC? So where does all this come from? It comes from this masterpiece of political strategy, the Arthashastra. It's attributed to this brilliant, shadowy figure named Kautilya. You might also know him as Chanakya. On the surface, it's a guide to running a state, to economics, to war. But hidden deep inside its pages is a manual for creating the most elaborate and frankly terrifying secret service you can possibly imagine. See, for Kautilya, just defending the borders, that was only half the battle. He was obsessed with information, with control. His grand vision was to give the king a network of eyes and ears so vast, so pervasive, it would be like he was a god watching over every single person in his kingdom. And this is where you see the sheer scale of his ambition. He brings up the god Indra, who legend says had 1,000 eyes. But Kautilya's point is that a human king can do even better, not with magic, but with a perfectly organized intelligence network. His plan was literally to turn the entire kingdom into the king's eyes and ears. The structure he came up with was just brilliant in its simplicity. He basically split his spies into two main groups. First, you have the samsta, the stationary agents. Think of these as your deep cover operatives. They would live for years, maybe decades, as a regular merchant or a quiet farmer, just blending in and gathering intel. And then you had the satri, the roving agents. These were the specialists, the troubleshooters. They were sent on specific missions, infiltration, sabotage, and yep, assassination. But this is where the true genius of this system becomes really, really unsettling. Because it's not just about who the spies were watching, it's about who the spies actually were. So you're probably picturing some kind of elite soldiers, right? A special secret police force operating in the dead of night. But Kautilya's idea was so much more insidious, and, because of that, so much more effective. They were the people you'd never ever suspect. The state would take in orphans and train them from childhood to be loyal only to the king. They'd use poor farmers, people desperate for a little extra money. They turned wandering nuns and supposedly holy men into informants. Your cook, your barber, the actress at the local theater, the fortune teller on the street corner. Literally any one of them could be a government agent reporting on everything you say and do. And that's the terrifying brilliance of it all. The network wasn't just watching society, it was society. This system created a world where you couldn't really trust anyone. It bred this deep underlying paranoia that guaranteed control. Because who would dare plot against the king if their own friends, their own family, could be his eyes? But Kautilya didn't just use his spies to collect information. Oh no, he weaponized them. He created the most extreme, the most deadly arm of his secret service, agents of death. First up, you have the Dikshna, the assassins. And the text is just chillingly specific about who they were looking for. These weren't just skilled fighters. They had to be completely fearless and, importantly, totally expendable. They were chosen specifically because they were willing to die for the mission. And then you have the Rasada, the poisoners. And listen to this description, it's absolutely bone-chilling. Kautilya wanted a very specific psychological profile. Cruel, lazy people with no family ties. Basically, he was looking for sociopaths. People who could kill without a shred of remorse and who nobody would miss if they got caught. This whole expertise in poison leads us directly to a legend that is echoed down through history. The Vishakanya, the poison damsel. Now the myth talks about these beautiful women who were raised on tiny doses of poison until their very touch became lethal. While that might be folklore, the Arthashastra details the very real and just as deadly use of female agents as expert poisoners. And the method itself wasn't magic, it was pure psychological warfare. Here's how a typical plot would go. An agent, disguised as a trusted holy woman, gets close to the target's wife. She builds trust, maybe gives her some harmless love potions to keep her husband's affection. Then, once the trust is absolute, comes the final step. She convinces the wife to help her give her husband one last special potion. Of course, it's a deadly poison. The target dies, his own wife gets blamed for the murder, And the agent, she just vanishes. It's cold, it's calculated, and it is brutally effective. So you have to ask, why? Why build such a horrifyingly complex system? Was this all just for the sake of tyranny? Well, for Kautilya, the answer was a lot more complicated. It was about survival in an incredibly brutal world. You see, this network wasn't just for controlling his own people. It was a primary weapon of foreign policy. Kautilya laid out a plan to have spies not just in enemy kingdoms, but in allied nations and even neutral ones. The lesson was simple. Trust no one, watch everyone. And this quote right here, this gets to the absolute heart of his philosophy. Why fight a bloody, expensive war if you can win through subversion? Why launch an invasion when you could just assassinate a rival king, spread rumors to turn his ministers against each other, and make his entire kingdom collapse from the inside? To Kautilya, the secret war was the real war. But to him, this wasn't about creating chaos. It was the exact opposite. It was about enforcing absolute, total order. In his mind, all of these ruthless, cold-blooded methods served the three main duties of a king: protecting the state from outside threats, keeping law and order inside, and ultimately ensuring the welfare of the people. It's a terrifying bargain, isn't it? Total security at the cost of total freedom. What's so staggering when you step back is this. When you read the Arthashastra, you're not just reading ancient history. You are reading a playbook that could have been written for the CIA or MI6 or any modern intelligence agency. Mass surveillance, psychological warfare, honey traps, false flag operations, targeted assassinations. It is all there, laid out in chilling detail. And that just leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling thought. Sure, the technology has changed. We've swapped wandering nuns for surveillance satellites and secret notes for encrypted data streams. But the fundamental principles of espionage, of subversion, of the state's endless thirst for information and control, have they really changed at all?